Welcome to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman.
And I'm Jamie Almanzan.
We are here to pump you up. I don't know. We're here. That's a reference.
How are you? Are we really? Does this actually cause people to feel pumped up? I am not sure about that, but I do think that they will enjoy our guest today. How's that for transition?
That's pretty good. I did want to hear about your time in...
I saw Casey Hologarth.
Oh, yeah.
He was there. And I ran up to him. Lee Loving knows Casey. And so I was like, I want to know him. I want to talk to him. So I ran up to him. He was like, didn't know me at all. Not one idea of who I was. And I was like, I'm actually not, I didn't interview. Peter interviewed you. I'm the clown on the other side, just talking about what I thought. He's like,
what do you think of that?
He was like, that's great. Yeah, that was such a great podcast. He's like, so funny because at ASA, I ran up to Peter and told him what an amazing podcast it was, how I loved the episodes. And I particularly loved the last episode. He's like, which was his or something, right?
And I didn't recognize him.
And yet, not one. You were like, oh, you know what? You should be on the podcast.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's too funny.
I'm like, did you tell that to him? He's like, no, I didn't want to embarrass him. I'm like, well, just let you know. I will be using. I'm like, that man knows
Casey.
So many people. I'm sure that's happened 1,000 times.
Oh my God. Well, now I know why I didn't come to our happy hour.
What an honor to meet him. I really was excited to meet him. Nice guy. Really nice guy.
Yeah.
And as you saw Shelley Berman again.
Yeah.
Got to hear. He is brilliant. He is such a smart man.
So I'm really excited about today's conversation, not only because I think we're going to get into Marlon Styles and our conversation that he and I had, but you and I were just chatting offline and you only alluded to this. You actually have a personal connection to Middletown City, Ohio. So
I do.
What's that about? Yeah, that's so exciting.
So in my first experiences coming out of the school system, I worked for an organization that supported Middletown City Schools or Middletown, Ohio. Gosh, when was this? A while ago. Before Marlon Styles. And I am a naive Californian. That's what I'll say I was walking into Middletown, Ohio, not knowing Ohio at all. I think I'd been to Cleveland once prior to that. And what I learned about my work in Middletown, I learned a couple things. One, first district I've ever worked in where middle income Black kids outperformed white students. First time I had ever seen that. And poverty had hit Middletown hard. And the naivete came from not really fully understanding poverty, that the loss of the paper mill, and then they also had a steel mill. And the steel mill was not open consistently. It was only open sometimes. So people would line up for work, hoping that it would open and give them work day to day. This place had a large Appalachian community, and that was the first time I got to interact. First time I got to interact within that community, within schools, and I just learned a ton. I mean, kind of connecting to Marlon's work, I had to listen. I had to learn what it meant to be from Appalachia, and I had to learn what it meant to live in Middletown, different from so many other places in Ohio. I found this in a couple cities now at the age that I am and having traveled all over. I found a stubbornness that is rooted in a love and care of their own community that Marlon kind of alluded to in relation to in his after action review. And I think that was true. Sometimes I was like, this stubbornness seems to your detriment, but I don't know if it was. It might have been just my naivete, my own limited understanding of the world outside of California. And so that Middletown was a huge learning for me. I feel I'm a changed man as a result of working there for 3 years. I'm a different person.
I really am excited to get into this conversation for everyone to listen to it. Marlon is fantastic. And particularly what I really appreciated about him, which you hear from people like Lavelle Brown and Shelley Berman and Scott Menzel, is the reclaiming the narrative around schools.
Yeah.
And so he talks about, and I want people to listen for it, is about like this bragging culture. And this is what I'll say about that as we go into it. I really believe that superintendents are like a three-legged stool. The first leg is the CEO. And so we'll get into that, I'm sure, because the CEO of a big organization, all of a sudden I had 3,000 employees, right, when I became superintendent. Right. So you're the CEO of a large entity. And then the second leg is you are sort of the town crier, and almost to say, in a way, right? All is well here. All is well. It is also for you to be the town crier to say, what I see over at Central Elementary School. Everybody needs to go see that. I mean, you are the town crier to say the innovation and the amazing teachers, right?
Right. Exactly. With a bell.
That's right. I wish I had a bell upstairs. All is well at Central. The third is whether you're a rabbi or a priest or an imam or whatever, you are responsible for blessing the good work that happens in a school. And so when I want people to listen for this, when he talks about we got to drown out the negative, drown it out with the positive. We need to bless the good work we see and then serve as the town crier and tell everyone amazing things are happening here. So if it's all right, we'll get into the conversation, but it looks like you want to say something before we do that.
I want to say one comment about that. I absolutely love the idea of drown out the negative with the positive. We seem to be bombarded with negative recently from every angle. And this idea of that, it really takes a toll. And it's not even stuff that's happening within my own community. And when I think about the amount of, I was going to ask this I'm going to lead a retreat with a cohort of educators in Redmond, Oregon. And I had this idea of what if we have them think about what is the best example, the most extreme, innovative example of schooling that they aspire to.
That's establishing a compelling purpose. That's appreciative inquiry.
I know. Oh, my partner, my colleague was they might struggle with that. They have spent the year in deep focus on one thing and it didn't go well. And so their ability to see outside of the one thing that didn't go well is limited. And so the question might overwhelm them. We might need to provide models or examples.
Models are great. Ron Berger would be a huge good proponent of that. You might consider asking them, when is a moment this year that you felt most energized? Yeah. Just like that question that, what was it, Lee Loving that talked about what is something that you're proud of, right? Yeah. So one was a moment. Lee Loving, I'm sorry for those who are listening, is a superintendent in Oregon, super dude.
North Santiam School District.
Right. And along with another colleague of his, Casey Hargeth, who apparently I didn't recognize at ASA, and I feel terrible about that. I really do. I'm so embarrassed.
Just so you know, that's my favorite thing.
Oh my God. Being able to ask them when was a moment this year where you felt most energized may then lead to understanding the moment and the project or whatever it was that they were involved in. And so that could help towards get to that overarching question that you really want to get to.
I really appreciate that. Let's listen to Marlon.
Yeah, let's do it. You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast. Imperfect Leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? Kind of a silly question, because I know you are. MPAT Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with MPAT Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. MPAT Speech, EMPAT Speech.com. Empowering students, empowering schools. Today on An Imperfect Leader, our guest is Marlon Styles, former superintendent of the Middletown City School District in Middletown, Ohio, where he was named a top 30 digital trailblazer by the Center for Digital Education and the K-12 Dive Superintendent of the Year in 2020 for his advocacy and leadership to close equity gaps on a national stage. These days, Marlon is partner at the Learner Center Collaborative. Marlon, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Peter, I'm so glad to be here. I've heard so many great stories about this podcast and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you and your members talking about leadership. Thanks.
I really appreciate it. My mother gets out and tells everybody. So you must have met my mother. All right. So, but it is so nice to meet you. I want to start right away with leadership, if that's okay. In the leadership model that I use to advise others, we talk about appreciative inquiry. And in the book I recently finished, I introduce a term which is the total opposite of appreciative inquiry. It's active negative data. It's like the constant focus and worry over just what's going wrong, which sometimes really plagues superintendents. With so much focus on the challenges in education, teacher shortages, funding concerns, learning loss, particularly post-pandemic, how can schools balance addressing real issues while also highlighting the positive stories that define their communities?
Yeah, thinking about leadership, Peter. So my first thought when you ask that question is, what are the people saying? What's on the minds of the people? You talk about an imperfect leader, right? imperfect leader is probably the best listener you've ever seen in the world, or even you're chasing the opportunity to be the best listener in the world. So I go right to the people that were in the position to serve as leaders, staff, the students, our learners, and the families in our community as well. So right off the bat, my mind's thinking, what's on their hearts, what's on their minds, and what tables, what convenings, what spaces can I create where I can ask some of those key questions and figure out what's on the hearts and minds of the people. That'll allow me to make some better decisions, right? The noise is the noise for sure. There'll always be noise. But if we can keep our ears close to what the needs and interests are of the people we serve, we've got a really good chance of making sure our work is focused on the right work. The second piece I'll share with you also to kind of wrap this comment up is this notion of, as an imperfect leader, right? I am chasing progress, not perfection. Really difficult when there's a lot of noise to be focusing so much on perfection and, the greatest results you can get in your world. But my focus as I really think about this imperfect leader and the situation you're talking about is how can we as a collective group, as a coalition, really start really getting excited and celebrating, talking about the great things we're doing and how we're gaining progress and making momentum towards, those metrics that indicate success for our community.
I read something, I watched some videos of you, and I mean, you were an incredibly dynamic presenter and obviously care so deeply about education and working with, and you talk about the voices, and I just love the fact that you remember and put first and foremost, like students, like what are they thinking, what's on their hearts and minds. And you said something about, you got to start bragging about the wonderful experiences. Like, don't hide it. Start bragging. And you're like, your whole chest comes out, And why do you think that's so critical right now?
Think about all of the experiences our kids get in schools every single day. Across this country, there's some amazing educators, some wonderful leaders in our school systems. Our learners in our school systems are getting some amazing experiences. And sometimes people know, sometimes they don't. When our learners are experiencing success, when their aspirations are really starting to become ignited, when teachers really find something exciting ways that get kids connected to learning, that really gets them energized, celebrating that. I've always had this mindset of we got to drown out the negative, drown it out with the positive. We got to create a mindset here in education. There's so many great leaders that already do this, but all those little bitty moments, how do we capture those? And in a 30-second little clip or a quick picture or a social media post or some way to recognize and celebrate the amazing experiences, it's just a necessity right now. It'd be a great opportunity for us to really think about how we can tell our story, but also drown out some of that noise that's really happening right now and really showcase the great things that are happening in our profession, especially our learners.
So what comes to mind for you as you think about bragging about the district that you most recently led, the work that you're doing, or a district that you're working with? Like, what comes to mind? Let's brag.
Yeah, let's brag, right? So I just left Adelanto Elementary School District in California, working with Learner Center Collaborative. They've got a guiding coalition of many different voices and stakeholders in their community, all sitting at the same table, building a shared understanding around their vision for their school district. The brag moment there is not the Board of Education. It's not the superintendent. There's a diverse representation of the whole community sitting in this room, dreaming about what's possible.
I love it. Asking, what do we want to create together?
Yes. Yeah. Let's brag about people coming together and celebrating what's possible. Adelanto Elementary School District. Let's brag about National School District in California. Superintendent LeAngela Brady doing some amazing things down there around her learner profile. She's not only socialized it and got some interest and some curiosities from the community about the outcomes the students should be building, but they're also right now digging into some new creative ways to bring that learner profile to life. It's not just the superintendent, right? She's a great model of an imperfect leader. She's got her ear to the ground, really listening to the aspirations of people. She's bragging right now about here's what we're trying to do for our kids. So there's a number of things that we could celebrate. Every little moment is a great opportunity to brag. Every big experience is a great opportunity to brag. My hope is that we start bragging every single day because there's always something positive happening in a school building somewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting because typically you ask someone, tell me about the state of education, give it a letter grade, just like a report card. And they go, D. They go, well, tell me about your own community, like where your kids go to school. Oh, A. And most people really do actually believe that education in their own communities is superior. And I do believe, this is what really attracted me to wanting to talk to you, is because if we were to be able to brag universally about the good things that are happening, even those small things, like you don't have to hide it. Like, what are you doing? Like, let's really do it. That may begin to sort of shift the sort of impression or the narrative that people have around public education in our nation because they believe locally it's all good. So if they can see that their neighbors are also experiencing great things, A, we get to share new ideas with each other. We get to maybe adopt some promising practices, but also recognize that there really is, public education is a promise that we make to our kids and to our communities, and that it's a really amazing product.
Absolutely. In Middletown, when I was superintendent there.
Yes, please tell me.
Hashtag Midi Rising every day, all day, right? Everyone had the permission. They were empowered to capture a moment and celebrate something positive. Doesn't matter how big or small it may be. Just connect it to this culture we're building around hashtag Midi Rising. Celebrate, brag, celebrate, brag.
Love it. Yeah. Sometimes there's this idea that innovation has to be some massively large project. And truly, innovation is just, I thought about this in a different way. And so I wanted to, connect people in a different way. That's an innovation. If you're just joining us on An Imperfect Leader, our guest today is Marlon Styles, former superintendent of the Middletown City School District in Middletown, Ohio, and a partner at the Learner Center Collaborative. All right. So we've just mentioned Learner Center Collaborative. Will you tell us a little bit about that work?
Absolutely. Some amazing people at Learner Center Collaborative. Just first of all, unbelievable organization. It truly is learner centered. Proud team member at Learner Center Collaborative now here for a couple years. Would love to shout out every team member if I could right now, if we had time, but I'm just going to shout out the team at Learner Center
Collaborative. People are like, that was like an hour-long podcast, but 40 minutes was just
shouting out the
people's
team.
names.
Great group doing unbelievable things to support school systems. At Learner Center Collaborative, we envision educational ecosystems where every learner, all learners, know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. That's what we stand for. That's what we believe. As we partner with school districts across the country, that's what we're trying to help them envision. Great spaces for kids to be able to live their aspirations, develop whole learner outcomes so they can actively engage in the world as their best selves. We're supporting school districts with frameworks for the future, creating their learner profiles, bringing guiding coalitions together to really think about what's possible inside a school system.
So these are a lot of terms. So as I imagine this in what I looked it up when I was looking at learner centers, learners at the center, obviously. And so that is absolutely their hopes, their dreams, their strengths, the areas that they're still developing. I mean, all of the center in terms of developing a path for them to be successful. They can graduate and go on and do great things, whether that's a 2-year school, a 4-year school, an internship, the military, going right into the workforce, whatever. And so you talked about, developing these profiles. Can you dig into that a little bit? How do you advise on that?
Absolutely, right. So they got a number of leaders across this country right now actively pursuing portraits of a graduate or a learner profile. Probably a number of leaders right now thinking about having one of those present in their school systems for all the right reasons. We bring a guiding coalition together of community members, stakeholders, learners, staff members, and we start exploring conversations about if our learners had aspirations in life, what outcomes, what competencies, what skill sets, what are the outcomes that we'd like to see in our kids? We take those outcomes, we create a visual graphic that represents what every child in the school system should be able to develop, those individual whole learner outcomes. We work with school systems to take those outcomes and create what we call learning progressions. So we basically take each of those outcomes and we talk about in each stage across the entire school system, what an empowered learner should be in kindergarten or what an empowered learner should be in 5th grade. And then we help school systems create their learning model, identify some big moves so that those outcomes can really start to come to fruition for kids in those learning spaces. It's a great model. If you're interested, we'd love to talk a little deeper about that offline if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, or, certainly I will make sure I ask you at the end to how can people find you if they want to talk about that or just in terms of meeting you. And because I know you do motivational speaking and being able to sort of kick off school years, end school years, have people really think about their role in school. So I won't forget to ask you at the end. So I've gotten to know some of the leaders at ISTE, and they really are some incredible educators. I know that you've had some coordination or at least crossed paths with them. Under your leadership in Middletown City Schools, you received the ISTE Distinguished District Award in 2019. And I'm curious how this recognition might have affected the district's approach to integrating technology in the classroom. And then you just spent a little bit of time talking about the Learner Center Collaborative and building where you want to be and then steps along the way to get there. So I'm kind of interested in what were those sort of lasting impacts that you observed in your own school district?
Yeah, to really lean into the Learner Center Collaborative terminology here, we work with districts to identify big moves. One of the big moves that I had as a superintendent, and this was a committee, it's not Marlon's taking ownership of this, but one of the big moves that we had was really wanted kids to be able to engage with technology as they were going through different learning experiences. Specifically, what I highlight today is this question that you have for me. It was about capacity building, the move that we made to focus on our educators being able to effectively have technology present in their learning spaces so their kids could really demonstrate what they knew and were able to do. What did that award do for us in Middletown City School District? It was great affirmation. One of the big moves we had at the time, ISTE had just released their ISTE certification for educators. We sent 4 teachers right off the bat as an affinity group to really pursue that certification with a number of supports. Step number 1. Step number 2, we wanted to really make a commitment that we had an ISTE certified educator in every single one of our school buildings. It was a very big, bold move that we made. We doubled down on our strategy and our structure for professional development. We created supports internally for those staff members to be able to pursue the certification in the school year. Move number 2. Move number 3, to kind of close this out, move number 3 is we really wanted it to inspire some new thinking in our educators about the types of experiences we could provide our learners. I'll give you a couple examples. We had an art teacher step up to the plate because he was so inspired about what technology could offer kids that he proposed a virtual reality course through art. Not because we asked him to, because he was inspired by, the presence of technology and the types of experiences kids were getting. He found some inspiration there, so we ended up with a VR class that we built ourselves. Inspired cool. Folks, right? We ended up finding kids who were playing video games in a classroom on a Monday afternoon in an English classroom. Talked to the kids. They were saying, we don't play football. We love playing video games. Next thing you know, we have inspired staff members hearing about what the kids need. They've got this great background around how to really integrate technology. You look up, we have an esports team. Last but not least, what I'll share is the last big move we made, just kind of close this question out, is capacity building always first. And we focused on our leadership, period. We went through a digital leaders boot camp for 5 straight days with all site and district leaders. This was the biggest move we made because we had instructional leaders on the ground. As we rolled out these really big, bold, big moves around technology in the buildings, our leaders were armed and had great capacity to be able to lead the charge. So it was a great event, and I really got a chance to celebrate the staff for all their hard work.
You're really describing a very clear systems thinking approach, starting with how do you build capacity with your 4 ISTE certified individuals and that is an impressive, that's no joke that program is, I think it's 10 months. It is regularly evaluated. You have work to do. You work with each other. To come back and influence their own individual buildings really speaks to, we didn't just buy technology and say I hope it works, but rather we're going to provide super users in your building who are going to get supported by us, who can then influence others to, aspire to other types of things. So I don't know if the art teacher was one of those 4, but it doesn't sound like that person was, but they went and ran with, a VR, program or a curriculum because they were inspired by their own colleague who said, how can I support you in your work? And then you didn't just leave it there. You said, okay, but I also need to make sure that our leaders, who often are not in the everyday teaching and learning piece as much as they want to be, have the skills that they need to continue to support that cultural field that's going to embrace technology. It was really smart.
Yes. Credit to the team. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I love to listen, right? The Imperfect Leader. Also share the phases of this so that we could scale, right? So we could scale those super users in our district. It started out with 4, year 1. Year 2, we opened up.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a ton of pressure on those 4, right?
4. Yeah. Year 2, we had a room of 25 inspired educators pursuing that ISTE certification. So again, the culture piece behind it was absolutely huge. Again, progress over perfection was all about building momentum behind those big moves, really impact the district the way our kids wanted us to.
So many leaders, I'm going to move to a different question. So many leaders have opportunities to speak at their state capitals. They are the experts, and legislators regularly leverage their expertise to come down and testify. I read that you testified at the federal level at the U.S. Congress advocating for access and opportunities for students. And I'm curious, this was in 2020. Can you share insights from that experience?
Yeah, would love to. First of all, I want to thank Tom Murray at All for Ed for the opportunity to really advocate for education in that particular moment. It was definitely tense, but I needed to really celebrate my man, Tom Murray, who does some amazing things for educators and kids across the country. So if you get a chance, check out Tom.
Sounds like he might be a good podcast guest. Sounds like he might be
highly recommend. Yeah.
All right, Tom, you're listening because we're going to tag you. You heard Marlon tell you.
Tom's got a big heart for people, a big heart for kids, and a big heart for educators. That experience was unbelievable. All for Ed presented the opportunity. They had a team that was there to really talk about what was needed at the time. They had some research that was available. And we really sat down and talked about what message did we want to offer the Congress at the time around some of the needs for education. Now, think about the timeline for this. This is right when COVID hit. So, we were all sitting at home trying to figure out what the people need. The experience itself was very unique. My favorite part about it is I had a chance to connect with some families in our community and hear their stories. What are you experiencing as a family, as a parent, as a learner in this new environment where you're sitting at home learning? Did I have opinions about what I thought was needed? Absolutely. And you probably had some too, Peter, as well as the listeners. But I wanted to really offer Congress the perspectives of our learners and our families and what they were experiencing and what they were asking for. We're able to couple that with some of the research and data that Offer Ed had at the time, put together a pretty unique message to be able to offer Congress. I will say I love speaking in front of people. I talk way too much, but I'll tell you that day, my heart was pounding in my chest when I got on camera.
Yeah, what an awesome responsibility, not just because you're representing you're carrying the stories of families who have trusted you to carry them with integrity. That had to be, there's a whole heightened level of intensity in that.
Yeah. And
you said the cameras were in front of you? What? You're just like,
sitting on Zoom, right? We're in the middle of COVID. So he was just sitting in front of this camera. It's just you, but you're talking to some very important people. Message you're carrying it is pretty massive, but it was a great experience. I love being able to advocate. I love hearing what people need and finding the courage to say it to the right people to see if we can get those supports and resources. So yeah, great experience. Very grateful to Tom Murray and Offer Ed for the opportunity. More importantly, I'd really appreciate Congress at the time. I mean, we had some heavy items, some recommendations around funding to support some of the needs at that particular time around COVID, but just their willingness to be present and listen and approach the conversation in a curious mindset really allowed us to have some productive conversation.
I'd like to ask you a question that I ask all guests who come on the podcast. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
Ooh, how does it resonate? I love it. First of all, it gives me a couple things to just stay connected with. Number one, I would say it resonates with me, and it offers me a mindset to really lead in a couple different ways. Number one, lead with humility, right? Recognize that I don't have all the answers, and I'm always going to be open to learning from those who I serve, not just those around me. Because, as a leader, sometimes you're around a certain group of people all the time, but really learn from all those that you serve. Number two, I need to own my mistakes. I probably make a ton of them, and I'm sure we'll probably dive into that here in just a second, but own my mistakes. I never hide failures. I acknowledge when I have them, and I learn from them as much as I possibly can. I try to model resilience for others. I said this before, I value progress over perfection. Truly mean that, and I double down on that every single day. I know we're always trying to build the perfect conditions that need to be present for learners to be able to actively engage in the world as their best selves, but sometimes we need to focus on making progress and building momentum in those conditions so that learners can thrive. I'll give you two more here, and then I'll see what you think. I would say it reminds me an imperfect leader elevates others all the time. All right, that's not for personal gain, but to always empower and uplift those around us, right? You talked about that ISTE award, but that was all about the staff. So always elevating others and being there when they need. And last but not least, I'll say an imperfect leader resonates with me because it reminds me to navigate uncertainty with confidence, right? Understand that leadership is about making the best possible decision with the information that you have, and that the path is sometimes unclear, but we have to be in the moment and with confidence digest that information and try to get us going in the right direction as best we can. Imperfect leader.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest today is Marlon Styles, former superintendent of the Middletown City School District in Middletown, Ohio, and a partner at the Learner-Centered Collaborative. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct the decision that they made and then we just talk about it. So, Marlon, what happened?
Well, Peter, it was my first year as a superintendent. You can laugh at this because I can laugh about it now. My first year, I remember we had a construction project and we had some overcrowding in our school system. Board of Education was really excited because we had a potential solution to add on some new learning space and address our elementary overcrowding, right? Sounds like a very simple problem to solve.
Yes, but any superintendent who is driving their car right now is like, facilities? Yeah, not so simple.
Facilities, I'm out, right?
I'm out. Right. I was a third grade teacher. I was great with teaching and learning. Now you want me, what, $300 million budget? Wait, we're changing attendance. Wait, what? How do I do that? Yeah.
Orders, yeah.
Yeah. Change orders? Oh, yeah, those are my favorite. Yeah.
So the board was excited, right? The solution was on the board. We want to build some new space. My first year superintendent, and I'm going to preface by saying the way this turned out, I probably should have been fired. My first year, I had a 5-0 no vote that I brought a solution to the table to solve the overcrowding with some new space. Here's what happened. The architects came in, the engineers came in, and we vetted all of our campuses, what made sense, what would give us the most efficiencies with the dollars we had, all those things. We designed the spaces. We went on what I thought at the time as an imperfect leader, what I thought was a campaign to engage the people and hear what they had to say and collect their opinions. What I thought was a good game plan to really do that on a really large scale, it ended up shooting me right in the foot.
Okay, so we're going to pause there. So if I understand correctly, you're a first-year superintendent. Is it fair to say there had been a campaign previous to your superintendency that authorized funds to do this, or you were a part of that as well?
The funds were already there. All right,
so funds were there. It's like, all right, you've inherited these funds. We've got overcrowding in elementary schools. We've got to do something about it. You began a listening tour with members of your community, with various stakeholders, and you brought something to the board and they said no. 5-0 no. Okay, so, I mean, that's a resounding no, right? So what got overlooked? What happened?
So we had some community sessions, and this is where I try to slow my thought process down because here's where I failed. We went to several different places in the community, great two-way dialogue, captured a lot of insights. We went to one school building, the school building where we were planning to propose to the board that we offer this new $10 million space, really beautiful place. In that meeting, it was the one space where there was opposition, no interest. Please don't bring the project here. The opposition showed up. We received the opposition in the moment. My failure, if I have to really recognize it, really didn't allow the opposition to really weigh in on the decision about where we should go. I never went back for additional conversations. I had a one-time engagement with that group of people, and they had different perspectives. Their insights should have been taken a little more into consideration, and we probably should have some deeper conversation as a superintendent. But my failure is I didn't go back, and I didn't really value the perspective of the opposition the way I had valued the perspective of the majority of the community who was in favor at the time.
Gotcha. So those who were most impacted by the decision had a perspective that may not have been well understood by the rest of the community because they weren't living in that space.
Correct. Correct.
What did you learn about relationships?
What I learned about relationships, I'm going to steal what my good friend John Malloy taught me several years back. John would say, Marlon, he goes, sometimes you have to stand or be willing to stand in the fire, but you don't have to become the fire, right? What I learned about those relationships is I became the fire because I did not have very strong relationships with some families in that community that would have allowed me to double down on my willingness to listen.
That's interesting. Yeah. For those who are new superintendents who are aspiring to be soups, you're having these really difficult conversations, but they don't know your heart yet, right?
Yes.
Because you're in your first year. They don't know you yet.
Yes. Yeah. So the relationship for me was very key. And what I learned in that particular moment, I leveraged it at a later time in my superintendency. And I was very present, standing in the fire, listening to some different perspectives around a different topic. Really listening allowed me to think about a better solution, and we ended up being successful in that route. But this one time, I did not value the opposition's perspective. I chose to bring something to the board that had just made sense. We had a lot of information. I thought we had 3. I was very confident that I was bringing 3 yes votes to the table. And in that conversation, in the middle of the board meeting, the board flipped and said 5-0 no as a first.
Yeah. I imagine also, I mean, with so many of us, we have to whip up the vote. So I was in a 7-member board, and often I'd say, okay, I just need 4 votes. On something like this, you really want closer to a 5-0 or 4-1. 3-2 means you're kind of limping into the decision and nobody's happy. I just offer that as at least my perspective for those who are listening. Do you have a similar sort of thought as you were continue to progress in your own superintendency, that a 3-2, you're victorious, but you may not win in the end.
Yeah, the stubborn side of me came out, right? The inexperienced side of me came out. Again, not valuing different perspectives really started to showcase as a deficiency, and really showcasing maybe a little more patience. Might have we allowed this to be a very different outcome. Did we eventually get to where we needed to be? Yes. But that lack of patience of, I've got the information, I've made the right decision, we need to go this.
Well, you were frustrated in that moment, right? You've got this mandate from the board, you've got this real issue. I'm sure you're hearing from much of the community, we're overcrowded, we've got to do something, and we don't have time to keep talking to people. That must have been frustrating when the only opposition was from the actual site you were going to do the work, and sometimes to take that pause and to step back and then say, okay, so what are your concerns? Or what is it that you want for children? Or, because I imagine part of them are, well, you're going to build this addition, it's going to bring more children to our school, our playgrounds aren't big enough, our cafeteria isn't big enough. It means that ARC will have to be on a cart, maybe, all the kinds of things that they're talking about, right? That may be unfounded, but are real concerns for them in that moment. Our older classrooms are not going to get renovated, but you're going to bring in this new space. So who gets those spaces? You're going to create an issue for us. So taking that time to really hear their perspectives. It may have been what you could have done differently. That's always a question of these 5 that I ask. What is something that you could have done differently?
Yes. So if I could have done something different, I would have definitely slowed the timeline down. And that may have, given me the runway to really go listen a little bit more and engage some different folks. If I would have had the courage to say, maybe this space won't be ready on day 1, but the courage to say our staff is amazing. The staff members in that building would be amazing. And if we had a mid-year transition, right, our staff is that great that we could have pulled that off.
Oh, that's really powerful.
I'll do it all over again. Timeline. I would have slowed the pace of this decision down completely.
In the end, what was something that was good that came out of this? You've had a wildly successful career. You're looking at year 1. These are the years that we make. We have a honeymoon, so we can survive those mistakes, but they sit on our hearts forever, and we think about them all the time. And so, but the project, I assume, got done at some point. So that must have been something that was good that came out of it. But what else? What was good that came out of it?
Two things, if you don't mind, real fast. Number one,
I love it. Yeah.
2 things that came out of this. Number 1, we had set the stage of the importance of having a learning model, the importance of having a vision for how learning will happen, and not allowing the architects to design a space. And then we build a space, and then we have to figure out how to use the space.
Oh, I love it. So starting with your end users, who are the users? Yeah.
Yes, right. So we had teachers sitting at this table, site leaders sitting at this table, dreaming up these different learning experiences. And then I think it was about a 6-week pace, the architects were coming in behind. And then this group was inspiring some of the ideas from the architects. So that's number
Marvelous.
1.
Yeah.
Number 2 is something that probably no one ever saw in my 6 years at Middletown City School District. This one situation that got a 5-0 no vote, it caused our team, as we went through the process of finding a decision, it caused us to sit down and look at each other and ask the question, what do we believe? And we had to make some decisions because we knew there was opposition. We knew we were walking into that board meeting facing some opposition, a potential no vote. But walking into that meeting, our team had to sit there and get real. I mean, real about what we believe in and make a decision that we felt was best for kids. We stood in front of the board. We offered that position around what we thought was best for kids, what we believed in. Even though it didn't turn out our way, it brought our team together. And for the next 5 years, we had 100% alignment. And what we believed in our hearts and minds was good for kids. We knew what we stood for. We had values and behaviors, and we had one single voice in that team as we went out and really served the community.
That's very powerful. And I imagine your board started to see that too, and their votes started to reflect a confidence in you and your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of learning there about how to really position certain big conversations, big moves, but how to put the board in a good spot to make decisions based on the information.
Because it's never good publicly to have a board go 5-0 no on your superintendent. It starts to begin to feed a narrative of, oh, they're at odds with each other. And so you want to enter a space. Sometimes you get criticized of like, well, they're just a rubber stamp. No, we've done our job well, because it means that we've had all these conversations leading up to it, public and sometimes one-on-one, to say, how can I make sure that we're meeting your needs and meeting the needs of the community that has elected you to be our board so that you feel confident voting yes when it comes to that time to go for a vote. So I don't think 5-0 votes in your favor are a rubber stamp if you've done your work well, because then there are no surprises. That was a 5-0 no surprise, and that's unfair to you and to them.
I think the most important piece to this, again, I take 100% ownership of this, having pushed the pace of this decision so much and the outcome we had and the delayed timeline for the solution, it just put more stress on the teachers who are in overcrowded spaces. It put more stress on the families who send children to overcrowded spaces. It puts stress on the students that was unnecessary in these overcrowded spaces. So looking back on this, had I had the perspective to really value the voice of the opposition, I would have a different perspective, and it really would have pushed me to slow this down so we had this done the right way. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so my last question is, what advice would you have for an aspiring leader? And what I'd like you to do, since I'm inviting you to do it so it doesn't seem, self-serving, I want you to tell people how can they get in touch with you? Because I think one part for an aspiring leader is to have that thought partner, that friend, that somebody who understands and gets it. And so how can they get in touch with you, either in terms of the professional work that you do with the organization, with Learner Center Collaborative, or in terms of just, your end of the year kickoff or the beginning of the year kickoff, the end of the year reflections, those types of things. So what advice do you have for an aspiring leader, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, advice that I have for an aspiring leader. If I had to go back and do it all over again and talk to myself, you see the little gray hairs in my chin right here. So it's been a while, but it's been a while since I've been in the game. But Peter, if I had to give some advice to aspiring leaders, I would say just this one piece. And there's a lot that I would give, but today I just want to share, when you first get into the job, what I experience is that sometimes people push us. The system pushes us. The culture of education pushes us to do the job a certain way. I would encourage aspiring leaders to really self-discover, look internally, and figure out who you are as a leader and do the job your way. Right? I love to talk. I am high energy. I'm a big culture person, always trying to elevate other people up, pouring into people as much as I possibly can. So as a young leader, young aspiring leader, whoever you are, and however you believe you need to lead as your authentic self to really inspire those that you serve, do the job your way.
How can people get in touch with you?
Two different ways. If you're excited about creating learner-centered environments in your school systems, frameworks for the future, coming up with possibilities for all your learners so they can actively engage in the world as their best selves, reach out to us at learnercenter.org, or you can email me at marlon@learnercenter.org. Would love to have a conversation about supporting your school systems, about learner-centered environments. I also do a number of back-to-school convocations, staff developments with keynotes and motivational speeches. If you're interested in having a speaker out to speak to your staff, your school community, or your learners, or doing some leadership retreat work, feel free to reach out to me. You can visit me on my website at marlonstyles.com. Peter, it's been a blast being on here today. Really excited about what you're doing for education, and really want to say just thank you for all you do for us.
Well, thank you. And our guest today was Marlon Styles, former superintendent of the Middletown City School District in Middletown, Ohio, and a partner at the Learner Center Collaborative. And a couple of things that I just wrote down as you were talking: lead with humility, lots of listening, notice the noise, but don't succumb to it. Really brag about your school district. Put students at the center. Really thinking about team. You refer to it either as team or staff, because that elevates all the others around you, right? Because they're the ones who are doing this work. Progress, not perfection. And I think that's probably a great place to end in terms of an imperfect leader. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you giving it to me.
Thank you for having me, Peter. Really appreciate it.
We're back, and I'm interested to know, just right off the bat, just right out of the gate, what was something that you felt like we were missing?
So I am moved. I was so interested in hearing, I really wanted to hear what was Marlon's experience. How did he get to Middletown, Ohio? What did he see about, how did he connect with the communities that were there and better understand the communities? And that part was missing for me, because I personally, Jamie, wanted to know that, whether or not other people need to know that. But that's what was missing.
That's really interesting. I certainly, I should have asked that question. I should have. I love when you listen and then you say, why did you ask this? Or I wish we had asked that. It's almost like part of next season, because we're coming to the end here before the summer hits. And not the end in terms of we'll have episodes all summer, but in terms of we restart again after Labor Day, in terms of some of our conversations. And maybe we should start spending one time each quarter, bring back people and say, well, here are the questions that Jamie wanted to ask. And we just do a little compilation. That'd be kind of fun.
I would love that. I think if people would be willing, I would love to bring back people and say,
call it Jamie's Corner.
I'm so interested in this idea.
He's got questions. He wanted to know, why didn't you ask?
That's so funny.
Take it away, Jamie.
Totally different thing.
Take it away. So, okay. I know right before we went into the conversation, I mentioned that the superintendent is a three-legged stool and the CEO is part of it. And when I say the CEO, it's not just, the superintendent should be the lead teacher, no doubt. And then all of a sudden they're in charge of finance. I mean, of course you have finance directors and you have assistant superintendents or a CFO.
Yeah,
you have
help.
You have an audit that is done each year. You have a finance committee. You have all these great resources. In the end, though, you're making recommendations and the board is approving or rejecting the sort of expenditures that you're suggesting. And facilities is a big part of that.
So that caught my attention. And as someone who, again, back to I've never been a superintendent, when you said you both were laughing and you made an offhanded comment of like I was a teacher. I may know something about teaching and learning. I don't know anything about a $10 million building. I was like, that's such a big aha for me of how many superintendents probably walk into that situation, not realizing that they have project manager sign-off powers to decisions that are,
I mean, the first sort of change order that you're recommending to the board to approve, and they're asking questions like, so is this an oversight? Was this a mistake? Was this, and you're going, well, actually, we started this project 2 years ago and now we're ready to build and that product doesn't exist anymore. And so we're asking for this change. But you had board members who started to say like, well, these contractors, do they know that? Then you become like, you're investigating. Like, what do I know?
Exactly. Do you remember who was that? God, that makes me think of our past guest, a past superintendent who talked about the same issue, a facilities issue with HVAC.
Air quality stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and how there was a mistake made and his strategy was
that's
like,
right. It was going to go, is everything ready? It's all ready. And they're doing the inspection with their union president and they discover, no, they're not ready. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I can't imagine.
So here's what I would say. So as your lead learner in terms of teacher and teaching and learning and being a good teacher and being able to present information in a way that can meet the different ways that people receive information. Yeah. I would say that a superintendent does an excellent job communicating a need and then having to then be able to work closely with your finance and your facilities folks to make sure that what you're communicating is a reflection of what the work that they're doing. Because just like a principal who was a Spanish teacher doesn't know anything about chemistry, most likely, they know good instruction. So they know communication in terms of how to do that. And I would say that I was the beneficiary of just a really smart superintendent who had created a 10-year plan, a 10-year model. So all this work had been done sort of that I inherited to say, here are the things we're going to need to look at every 2 years. And so I then had to communicate well to the community about, look, we're asking you to vote again for a bond, which is essentially asking them to use their homes as collateral. You're essentially asking for a mortgage to be able to build this $18 million elementary school or this $70 or $80 million middle school. And then you have to leverage your relationships with county and city as you're selecting property to then make sure that it is property that they can get behind, because you have to talk about traffic studies and what's in that land and environmental studies, all those kinds of things. Then I loved learning. And it's sure I giggled because it's like, wow, I know language acquisition. Like that's what I taught.
But that was a fabulous explanation. Fabulous. That was a fabulous explanation for Jamie, where Peter and Jamie seem to have not only the same voice, but a similar brain in terms of how we understand metaphors and examples. But the reason why I love it so much is there's this like content expertise, right? You have some content expertise that you could apply in those areas. But here you're talking about skill expertise. You've got some skill expertise in communication. And so the content, I talk about this all the time as a coach.
Communication and relationship, because you also know what people value and what's important to them. So when you're going to your community to say, will you please approve this $90 million bond That's not going to raise your taxes, but it is going to extend the payments that we're going to make for now another 20 years, another 30 years. And so you have to put in there items and projects that will speak to what the community values. And in my community, athletics and activities and the arts were important. And so athletics, I was like turfing everything. Everybody wants a turf field, for the practice fields and this field and that one. Well, we would also make sure we striped it so the marching band had a real place to practice. And so all those kinds of things become a part of it.
I think what you're saying resonates for me because I think that's why Marlon and you were strong superintendents. You're both enthusiastic communicators, enthusiastic relationship builders. So you may not know about what the environmental study needs to do step by step, but what you do know is who we should go talk to and how to communicate that this is an important thing to look at and that it impacts who we are as a community. I think you guys probably were great at this part. Really good.
I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Although I would say that sometimes it was exhausting because also you're negotiating. Everybody is asking their community for money. If it's the fire department, it's the library, it's the city hall, it's the police, it's, so you think about all the taxing entities and they're all asking. And so you risk voter fatigue. And so you come together to say, okay, we're going to go this year, then we're going to stay quiet for a year. And then so here's our 10-year plan. We're going to come back every other year. Yeah. And so Parks and Rec know when they're going for their tax. And so that we're quiet. Yeah. And so all of those kinds of things. And then Parks and Rec is smart because they'll put something on their tax that says, and each year we will build 1 or 2 school playgrounds. We will either refurbish, renovate, rebuild. We have a certain amount of money and the schools will help guide us on where they want that. And so then it becomes, oh, good. Look at all these systems that are interacting and working together, not in isolation.
I love this.
Isn't that cool?
This is riveting to me.
Yeah. I mean, that was a lot of hard work. It was good work. Let me just turn back one more time before we finish for today. Something that Marlon, I think, ought to be recognized for. And I know that you asked me off air to just maybe talk a little bit about what ISTE is.
Yeah, I would love to have never heard of this thing. What is that?
Yeah, so
and what makes it rigorous?
So the International Society for Technology and Education. And they really, in so many ways, are the gold standard when it comes to integrating technology in schools. And so as superintendent, at the advice of our media specialists and the director of media and technology, they would both really urge me, and we authorized in their budget for them to be able to take their professionals to annual conferences, regional conferences, and to be able to learn about integrating technology in a meaningful way, not just substituting, instead of a overhead projector, we're going to use a smartboard. Okay, how are we going to actually meaningfully use these in projects? And so it is a rigorous certification process if you go and get ISTE certified. And so just the fact that there are teachers all across the nation who really become super users in their buildings. So the fact that Marlon was awarded a distinguished district award, that his district was the recipient of, that really speaks to not just Marlon, but all the incredible people he got to work with. And so I just felt like that was important. And then it sort of led me to, sometimes people will say when I ask, what advice do you have? And they give advice and you're not sure if they mean it. They're saying all the right things. But I really felt like when his advice, I found it was profound. I mean, here I wrote it down. Self-discovery, look internally, and figure out who you are as a leader, and then do the job your way. And I thought that was important because he was talking about actively engaging your school community and the world as your authentic self. We take over for people and we try to carry on their good work. And sometimes we try to be them, and we have to realize we have to be ourselves and lead I think I mention this each week, but lead with that empathy and lead with that compassion and be that human-centered leader.
Will you say the 3 things again?
Self-discover, look internally, and figure out who you are as a leader.
That part, he named it as 3 things, but that part is not flippant. It's not just a statement. Self-discovery is maybe the purpose of this entire podcast. Persistent, disciplined self-reflection over and over. One of my favorite things about seeing Casey Hallgarth and why I thanked him so much and why I think he's great, is he was open to talking about his own failures. And it's in that. And I know that's hard. And I know that puts you at risk. And I'm saying that there is freedom in your ability. You learn so much more when you're able to say, yeah, man, I really messed that one up. It's my favorite. I just love it.
Well, Jamie, I think we're at the end.
Yeah.
I have
Marlon was
to
great.
think about...
Thank you for having him.
He was really a 5-star guest. In fact, 5 stars might be the best way to express your gratitude, to express your interest.
We are getting so good at
Jamie's
smooth
Corner.
transition.
Give
Man,
us 5
I don't think
stars.
anybody's noticing that we're even working it in. It doesn't.
So
it
sweet.
comes off. Yeah,
So
if I hadn't
sweet.
said anything, people would have just subliminating.
Man. All right, listen. You've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership podcast. I'm so happy that you give us some time each week. And Jamie, I will see you next week.
I'll see you next week, Peter.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership podcast.